Inflation is stealthy. It is a quiet thief that won't bankrupt you overnight, but it will slowly steal your financial future if you don't fight back. Today, I'll show you exactly how inflation silently destroys wealth, and then I'll reveal the 5 strategies you can use to protect yourself against it. First, let's discuss what inflation really is. If you've recently shopped for groceries, filled up your gas tank, paid a utility bill, ordered food from a restaurant, made an insurance payment, ordered items online, paid your rent, had your hair cut, or purchased any other types of goods or services, you already intuitively know what inflation is and how it can quickly devour your money. President Ronald Reagan described inflation colorfully when he said, "Inflation is as violent as a mugger, as frightening as an armed robber, and as deadly as a hitman." While that may sound overly dramatic, it does highlight one truth about inflation, that it can cause real, long-lasting harm in people's lives. Technically speaking, inflation is the general increase in prices for goods and services across an economy over time, which reduces the purchasing power of money, meaning each unit of currency, like the dollar, buys less than it used to. In more personal terms, it's the reason that we paid approximately $3.59 for a dozen eggs in the U.S. in early 2026, but only paid about $1.47 for that same dozen eggs in 2021, and why a gallon of gas cost an average of roughly $3.29 in early 2026 versus $2.33 in 2021. When most people think of a financial catastrophe, they think of things that are sudden and dramatic, like losing a job, a stock market crash, a medical emergency, or losing your home in a natural disaster. But inflation is different. It's not an inferno. It's more like a slow burn that gradually eats away at everything it touches. Let's take a closer look at how inflation affects an average U.S. family of 4 in 2026. Meet Judy. She's 35 years old. She's a wife, a mother, and a school teacher. She goes grocery shopping every week for her family, which includes herself, her husband Frank, who's a 36-year-old firefighter, and their 2 children. She remembers when, in 2021, she could fill her grocery cart for around $250 each week. Now, 5 years later, that exact same grocery cart full of items costs her family approximately $340 each week. That's an increase of 36%. As a result, simply feeding their family has now become a financial strain, and groceries are only one part of their monthly expenses. Taking an even bigger bite out of their monthly budget is housing costs, which is their largest monthly expense. In 2021, Judy and Frank moved their family into a typical middle-class, single-family home with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a small backyard, where the rent was $1,900 a month. It was a lot, but it was manageable. Now it's 2026, and they are paying $2,450 a month to rent that same home. That's an increase of approximately 29% in 5 years, and that is not nearly as manageable. Their kids are growing up fast, and they would like to move into a larger home, but with the cost of housing, they feel like they're stuck where they're at. Now consider this. Up to this point, we've only discussed the rising costs of groceries and housing. Imagine how much worse it gets for Judy and Frank when we factor in the rising costs of everything else in their lives, such as the rising insurance costs, their higher electric bill, and the increased cost of clothes for their kids, to name only a few. As eye-popping as all those price increases are, however, here's the really scary part. Judy and Frank's household income only went up approximately 20% during that same 5-year period, from about $95,000 a year to roughly $114,000 a year. So, while they have been doing all the right things, working hard at their jobs and earning raises each year, they have actually been slowly falling farther and farther behind financially. Why? Because inflation is a monster with an insatiable appetite that mercilessly eats up their raises and then goes on to greedily devour more and more of what's left of their income. That is the stark reality facing Judy and Frank's family, and it's the stark reality facing millions of other families in 2026 as well. But inflation doesn't stop there. It's got another trick up its sleeve. In a masterful performance of misdirection and distraction, inflation says, "Look over here at me," as it devours your raises and income, while, at the same time, it stages a sneak attack on your finances from another direction by acting as an invisible tax on your savings. For example, let's say Judy and Frank have been able to build an emergency fund of $18,000, or about 3 months' worth of expenses, which they keep invested in an online high-yield savings account, earning an annual interest rate of 3.25%. They should feel proud. They've worked hard to build up their savings, and what they've accomplished is a great start, right? It definitely is, but consider this. If inflation is running at 3%, the true purchasing power of their emergency fund only grows by 0.25% annually. In other words, the real-world purchasing power of their emergency fund has essentially flatlined. And if they had kept their savings in a traditional brick-and-mortar bank that provided a significantly lower interest rate, the situation would have been much worse. In fact, their real return would have been negative, losing about 2.55% or more in real purchasing power each year. Inflation isn't only stealing from you when you're spending money, it's also stealing from you when you're saving money. Inflation is the thief that's got one hand in your pocket and the other hand in your bank account. At this point, you may be saying to yourself, this is bad, but it can't possibly get any worse, can it? Unfortunately, when it comes to inflation, it can, because inflation can put the squeeze on your finances in another way. It does so through variable rate debt, which is any debt that adjusts or resets based on prevailing interest rates. Examples of variable rate debt include adjustable rate mortgages, ARMs, home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, variable rate business loans, and variable rate student loans. So for example, let's say that a couple took out a HELOC on their home at 4% to do some home renovations at a time when inflation was more normal. Maybe they decided it was time for a kitchen upgrade, or perhaps they decided to move forward with that addition they had been talking about for so long. What happens in that scenario when inflation rises? Well, we know that when inflation goes up, interest rates generally rise as well. If that happens and the couple's HELOC resets to 8% or 9%, their monthly payment will increase dramatically and quickly, typically within 1 to 2 billing cycles. That quick reset can devastate a family that is financially unprepared. Even if inflation cools later, the rate reset damage may have already been done. As we are seeing, inflation is relentless, and its main objective is to cause financial upheaval in people's lives. Before we move on to a more positive topic, the strategies you can employ to fight back against inflation, there is one last area we need to address where inflation indirectly inflicts some of its worst long-term financial devastation. Think about this for a moment. If you're struggling to cope with the rising cost of inflation at every turn, but still need to feed yourself and your family and also pay your bills, what are you likely to do? If you're like a lot of people, you will probably turn to your credit card. You're not being reckless or irresponsible. You're trying to do the right thing by making sure you can put food on the table, keep the lights on, pay your rent, and buy yourself some time. But credit cards are especially dangerous in inflationary periods because, as we know, when inflation rises, interest rates generally rise. And when interest rates rise, so do the rates that credit cards charge. With average credit card APRs currently hovering above 20% in 2026, credit cards can easily create a vicious feedback loop, where reliance on high-interest credit cards creates more personal debt, which in turn adds more stress to your personal finances, which then, in turn, requires you to rely even more heavily on credit cards, which then creates more personal debt, and so on and so on. It is a cycle of financial misery and misfortune that can be very difficult to escape from, and the whole negative cycle is amplified by inflation. A quick side note, if you have personally felt the impact of inflation in your own life, if inflation has left you feeling stressed, exhausted, or burned out, if you feel like you've been running but not getting ahead, please subscribe to our channel so we can fight back against the rising costs of inflation together, because we are always stronger when we are working together. Now here is where things begin to get exciting, because so far we've only talked about the inflation problem, but now we're going to talk about the solution and how you can wrench back control of your life from the grip of inflation. Because while inflation can feel overwhelming, it is not unbeatable. In fact, throughout history, millions of people have learned how to not only survive inflation, but thrive during it. They do so by adapting, adjusting, and building a financial life that is stronger than inflation. Inflation is not something you can survive passively, simply hoping for the best. It is something you must actively outmaneuver. You cannot control the economy, you cannot control monetary policy, but you can control how exposed you are to their potential negative effects. Here are 5 powerful strategies that will help you always remain at least one step ahead of inflation. Because if you're always one step ahead, inflation can never catch you. Number 1, increase your income aggressively. The first strategy is simple but incredibly powerful. Increase your income faster than inflation increases your expenses. That may sound obvious, but most people never pursue it deliberately. Instead, they cross their fingers and hope their annual raise will keep up. Unfortunately, as Judy and Frank discovered, raises often lag behind inflation. So the goal becomes increasing your earning power. One of the best ways to do that is through something called skill stacking. Skill stacking means combining the expertise you already have with new abilities that increase your value in the marketplace. For example, imagine Judy continues her education as a teacher and goes on to earn a degree in educational leadership. Now, she can apply for the much higher paying school principal position that just opened up, moving from delivering lessons to her students in the classroom to shaping the learning environment of the entire school. The real-life implications of Judy's promotion for her family is significant, almost doubling her annual salary from $54,000 as a teacher to $105,000 as a principal. As a firefighter, her husband Frank can do something very similar via skill stacking. Imagine Frank furthers his own education by taking courses in fire prevention and investigation, code enforcement, and legal procedures. Now, Frank can apply for the much more financially lucrative role of fire marshal, allowing him to move up from earning $59,000 a year as a firefighter to earning $81,000 as a fire marshal, an increase of $22,000 per year. The great thing is that neither of them had to come out of pocket at all for their advanced training. Their employers fully reimbursed them for the tuition costs. They essentially received free training that led to huge bumps in pay for both of them. The only things they had to provide were time and energy. Like Judy and Frank, look for opportunities to skill stack in your own career, and then pursue the ones that suit you best. And don't overlook those opportunities that your employer will pay for. The key idea of skill stacking is simple. Same core career, but more opportunity and higher pay, making it harder for inflation to outrun you. Another powerful way to fight inflation is adding a second stream of income and becoming a business owner. This doesn't have to start as a huge business. It can begin with something small, and it can tie in nicely with skill stacking, building off of your current skills to build something new. For instance, Judy could start her own side business as a tutor in the evenings at $75 per hour. With only 5 one-hour tutoring sessions per week, she could earn over $18,000 per year, using skills she already possesses. For Frank's part, he could use his knowledge of buildings, structures, and safety to get licensed as a home inspector. With his 24/48 firefighter work schedule, where he works a 24-hour shift and then has 48 hours off, he could easily set up home inspections for his days off. Even if he only completes one home inspection each week, at approximately $500 per inspection, he would still be earning approximately $25,000 extra each year, all while setting his own schedule and being his own boss. Even if your second stream of income starts off small, over time that second stream can grow into something powerful. And once your income becomes diversified, inflation has a much harder time cornering you financially. Instead of relying on one paycheck, you now have multiple streams flowing into your life. If one primary stream dries up, a second income stream can be scaled up to help offset the loss and provide flexibility. As a business owner, you also gain something employees don't have, the ability to adjust prices as inflation rises. That flexibility can prove to be incredibly powerful. Another way to increase your income is through negotiation. Many people underestimate the power of simply asking for more. If you've been delivering results at work, it may be time to have a conversation about compensation. Preparation is key, however. Research salary benchmarks for your occupation, so you will have more negotiating leverage if you are being underpaid for your job. And be prepared to provide detailed documentation of your contributions to the company's bottom line. how you helped increase revenue or cut costs, the projects you completed, the problems you solved, the skills you added that make you more efficient. Employers respond to value. Show your employer how you provide value to the company, and you may be able to secure more pay simply by asking. Sometimes the biggest raise you ever receive begins with a well-prepared conversation. If your income grows 6% and inflation is 3%, you expand margin, and margin is the oxygen that gives you more breathing room. Number 2, cut fixed costs strategically and aggressively. The second strategy for dealing with inflation is especially powerful because it can have a positive impact almost immediately. When people talk about cutting expenses, they often focus on small purchases like coffee or takeout. But the truth is, the biggest financial wins almost always come from fixed costs. These are the large expenses that repeat every month, and small improvements here can create massive long-term savings. Let's be clear, you don't need to cut everything. You need to strategically cut the right things. A permanent 10% reduction in a major expense can provide substantial relief, but cutting 10% or more of multiple major expenses can change your family's life forever. A prime candidate for fixed cost cutting is insurance. Insurance companies quietly raise premiums all the time. Whether it's auto insurance, home insurance, or health insurance, unless you have shopped for better rates recently, you are almost certainly paying more than you need to. Many families simply renew their insurance policies year after year without questioning the rate increases. It's understandable because it's easier that way, but it can prove costly. By spending just a few hours one afternoon speaking with an insurance agent or comparing quotes online, you could possibly save hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars per year. Periodically shopping your insurance is one of the easiest ways to lower your costs and put a little more distance between you and inflation. Housing is a more sensitive topic when it comes to cutting costs because everyone needs a place to call home. But for most households, housing is the largest expense by far. Therefore, it is worth evaluating for cost-cutting opportunities because small adjustments can make a huge difference. If you are a homeowner and mortgage rates have dropped, you may want to consider refinancing your mortgage. It could be a quick way to reduce your expenses. If your rent has become exorbitantly high, consider moving slightly farther away from a city center or more populated area to a less populated area. A few miles of extra drive time to get to work, the grocery store, or the local shopping center could mean saving hundreds or thousands of dollars a year. And during the most severe financially tight periods, downsizing to a smaller home could be the necessary step to take. It may not be the most desirable option, but if it's necessary to provide financial peace of mind, then it is likely the best option for you in that moment. These decisions aren't always easy, but they can dramatically improve long-term financial stability. And financial stability is one of the key pieces of armor you need to defend yourself against inflation. Cars are one of the most underestimated financial drains on a household budget. There is a cost of insurance, fuel, and maintenance, but for a lot of people, there is also the exorbitantly high monthly loan payments. Driving a shiny brand new car is nice, but sometimes the smartest move financially is keeping a reliable car longer and driving it for as long as possible after it is paid off instead of constantly upgrading. Not only will you no longer have monthly car payments, but you will likely pay less for insurance because your car's value has decreased. Cutting car payments out of your monthly expenses can free up hundreds upon hundreds of dollars. Then you can take that monthly savings and set it aside, so the next time you buy a car, you can pay for it in full, no car payments required. Subscriptions are another area where costs quietly accumulate. There are many different types of things you can subscribe to. There are video streaming services, music streaming services, software subscriptions, gaming services, memberships, news subscriptions, fitness apps. The list goes on, and many people are paying for services they rarely, if ever, use. A quick subscription audit could potentially eliminate $100 or more in unnecessary monthly spending. Your bank account will thank you for cutting out the dead weight of unused subscriptions, and you will probably never even notice the difference. By this point, you can probably see inflation starting to fade into the distance, but now the goal is to make inflation disappear permanently as a factor in your life. The way to do that is by implementing the final 3 strategies. Number 3, build an inflation buffer. The third strategy is all about building financial resilience. Inflation's modus operandi is to create financial pressure in an attempt to create cracks in your financial foundation. To withstand the pressure and avoid cracking, you will need to become financially resilient by building an inflation buffer. Here are the ways to do that. Build a 6 to 12 month emergency fund. An emergency fund acts as a financial shock absorber. If expenses spike or income temporarily drops, that savings cushion prevents panic decisions. For many households, building up 6 to 12 months of living expenses can provide tremendous peace of mind. Start small so as not to get discouraged. First, focus on saving a 1 month emergency fund, saving wherever you can. Then build that up to 2 months, 3 months, and so on, until you have reached the minimum goal of 6 to 12 months of living expenses. Once you've accomplished that, if you or your partner lose your job, or a medical issue sidelines one of you for a while, or life happens, you can take the appropriate amount of time to make good, well thought out decisions about your future, instead of being forced to make hasty decisions out of desperation. But keep in mind, 6 to 12 months is the minimum you should shoot for. In our uncertain world, longer is even better. Create separate sinking funds. In addition to emergency savings, many financially disciplined families use sinking funds. These are savings buckets specifically set up for predictable future expenses, things like car repairs, medical bills, home maintenance, holiday spending. When these costs appear, and they always do, the money is already waiting in the designated sinking fund. No debt required. With an inflation buffer, you will have a solid foundation to stand firmly on when you are staring down rising inflation. Number 4, own inflation-resistant assets. The fourth strategy for beating inflation is crucial. If inflation is causing prices to rise across the economy, you want to own things that rise in value alongside it. Historically, several types of assets have shown resilience during inflationary periods. Broad stock market investments. Owning shares of the broader stock market means owning pieces of thousands of businesses. When inflation increases, businesses often respond by raising prices, which can lead to growth in their revenue. And when a business's revenue grows, the company's value can grow as well. This is why long-term investing in low-fee, broad stock market index funds has historically been one of the most effective ways to build wealth over time. By getting in on the game as a fund owner, you can share in the upside of businesses profiting during times of inflation, and you can profit right along with them. Investments in real assets. Real assets include things like real estate, farmland, and commodities. These assets often increase in value when inflation rises because they represent tangible resources that society continues to need. Housing, land, and energy don't disappear when inflation rises. In fact, their value often increases. There are mutual funds and ETFs, exchange-traded funds, specifically designed to provide diversified exposure to each of these asset classes. But, as with any investment, be sure to do your research and due diligence before investing. Investments in income-producing assets. Income-producing assets are anything that generates income. Things like rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, businesses, royalties, digital products. The more assets you own that generate income, the less your financial life depends on a single paycheck, and the stronger your position becomes when inflation strikes and prices rise. Number 5, avoid lifestyle creep. The final strategy to combat inflation might be the most powerful of all, avoiding lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep happens when spending automatically rises every time income rises. A higher salary leads to newer, more expensive cars, new gadgets, more toys, a designer label wardrobe, and a bigger house. And suddenly, despite earning more money, financial progress disappears. Instead, the most financially successful people practice delayed gratification. When income increases, they invest in the future instead of status signaling. They save more. They build assets because they know that the real goal isn't looking wealthy today. The real goal is actually becoming wealthy tomorrow and to be in a strong financial position when inflation tries to attack. When you put these strategies together, something powerful begins to happen. Your financial life begins to adapt to inflation instead of being crushed by it. Your income grows, your opportunities expand. You control your biggest expenses. You prepare for financial shocks. Your assets begin working for you. And slowly, the pressure that inflation once created begins to fade. Because the ultimate goal isn't simply surviving inflation. The goal is building a financial life that is strong enough to rise above it. Inflation may be stealthy. It may quietly chip away at paychecks, savings, and financial stability. But it is not invincible, and it does not get the final word over your financial future. The truth is this: people who understand how inflation and money work, who increase their value, who build multiple income streams, who control their expenses, who build an inflation buffer, who invest in assets that grow, and who avoid lifestyle creep, often come out stronger on the other side of inflationary periods, not because they were lucky, but because they were intentional and took action. And intentional action can change the entire trajectory of your financial life and defeat inflation once and for all. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe to Millionaire Thinking, where we are dedicated to helping people achieve, protect, and expand their financial freedom. And if you know someone who has been feeling the pressure of rising costs lately, share this video with them. Because the more people who understand how money really works, the more people can stop feeling trapped by inflation and start building the kind of financial life they truly want. And remember, inflation may raise prices, but with the right strategies, you can raise your financial life even faster. See you in the next video.